Hey guys, it's God Bars here, the self-proclaimed hip-hop historian, and this is the 71st episode of my series where I grab a vinyl from my collection, talk about why I love it, what influence it had, and what its place is in the grand scheme of hip-hop. It feels like forever since I've covered the golden age, and while I'm still determined to keep this group to five to make it last a little longer, it definitely wasn't easy to narrow down. There were, however, a couple classics that I knew were going to make the cut from the jump, one of those being De La Soul's debut here. Really, the only reason this album wasn't in the first 80s group is because I discussed De La Soul is Dead, their second album, in my first five reviews, and I wanted to get to artists who hadn't had a chance to be featured yet. But now it's been so long since that video, I felt like the trio's return to the page was a bit overdue. While I've mentioned that their second album is my favorite of theirs, when it comes to De La Soul is Dead and 3 Feet High and Rising, it's more like 1A and 1B opposed to first and second. This is because I enjoyed the overall experience and aesthetic of De La Soul is Dead more, but on the other hand, 3 Feet High and Rising is a spotless project with much more influence than really any other album in their discography. And don't get me wrong, there's influence and quality throughout all of their work, but their debut release is one of the most influential hip-hop albums the entire decade had to offer. Keep in mind that this was before any of the debuts would come from A Tribe Called Quest, Queen Latifah, Black Sheep, and Brand Nubian. To my knowledge, the only Native Tongues act that already had a successful LP out at this time was Jungle Brothers, with their classic debut Straight Out the Jungle. While they really helped set the wheels in motion for this movement and still are deservedly looked back on as pioneers to this day, to my knowledge, Jungle Brothers didn't reach the level of impact De La did with their first album, but to be fair, not many acts could. For example, Brand Nubian stayed pretty consistent with their quality of music after the success of their debut One for All, but they weren't the household name some of their contemporaries were, possibly because of a number of controversial viewpoints. But back to 3 Feet High and Rising, the feat pulled off here by Posdnuos, Trugoy the Dove, Maceo, and Prince Paul left a marker on hip-hop's timeline that will probably last as long as there's fans of the genre. At the time, the hip-hop acts that were dominating were names like Run DMC, Boogie Down Productions, the Beastie Boys, EPMD, Big Daddy Kane, Slick Rick. Even the West Coast was starting to form its own sound with NWA and Ice-T. While all these artists released classic work and had their own distinct strengths, something Native Tongues felt was missing from the game was an air of positivity, self-love, and Afrocentrism. Of course, Public Enemy would incorporate a lot of that historical influence as well, but their inspiration was funneled into the Fight the Power movement, and positivity isn't exactly a term I'd tag on to an album like Fear of a Black Planet, though there definitely is a persevering sense of we will overcome and we're strong when we're all together that plants little seeds of hope throughout the albums. De La Soul were as affected by those racial and societal issues as anyone, but they focused more on the outlet the genre created for them, which in 3 Feet High and Rising is showing an unmistakable love for hip hop and music in general. I mentioned in my De La Soul is Dead video that they got pretty sick of the stigma they were painted with, as the daisy and peace sign artwork on the first album's cover resulted in being labeled as hippies, which nobody in the crew appreciated. However, when you remove that and just look at the debut independently, the flowers and peace symbols are a welcome decoration that, along with self-identity, are tied back into the album thematically. Backed with Prince Paul's soulful, groovy samples, they created an experience unlike anything else in the genre at the time. It isn't solely what they talk about either. The chemistry between Trugoy and Posdnuos is infectious, and they were executing their tight, character-filled flows with extreme precision, especially for how young they still were. And they would often approach rapping and delivery in general in a very unique and creative way. There's just an aura on every single song here where, even though they weren't exactly sure how the product would be received by the masses, they clearly knew they were making something special. Once they initially found their sound on the Plug Tune-In demo, Prince Paul instantly saw the vision and gave it a more professional mix so it could be shopped around. The influential label Tommy Boy took a chance on De La's debut album, since they too were able to see how special the music was. The result was by no means a sleeper hit, where nobody noticed it at first and then it later got recognized as influential. It couldn't be more of the opposite. This album was an undeniable critical and commercial success and became the blueprint for countless future hip-hop acts. Even with Tribe, who arguably ended up besting De La's massive popularity, were pushed by 3 Feet High and Rising to try and make a debut that could compete. From rappers to casual fans, there were millions of quote-unquote weirdos who didn't quite fit in, who found massive comfort in their music. Kids who wanted to be part of hip hop, yet didn't gravitate to the gold chains or misogyny and wanted to express themselves through means that may not traditionally be thought of as cool. People like to act like all the face tattoos and weird hairstyles and forms of self expression in modern rap solely stemmed from Lil Wayne because he had Lil in his name and had face tattoos 20 years ago. And obviously, Wayne is a ridiculously huge influence on rap culture, but I feel like a lot of the kids who praise him for his impact don't acknowledge or even recognize the groundwork that a group like De La Soul laid down before him. They had unique hairstyles and wardrobe choices that didn't come from them trying to be different, it came from them being themselves and that happening to not fit the social norm. Another staple in hip hop that was basically invented by this album was the advent of hilarious and well produced skits, which would return on their second LP, but the albums that followed that, it kind of took a backseat. I think if we never got De La Soul and the native tongues in general, there's a good chance we would have never heard these amazing forward thinking artists they inspired, with just the tip of the iceberg being Black Star, Dead Prez, and of course Common. The only features listed on this thing are native tongue affiliates Q-Tip and Jungle Brothers, unless you count the Otis Redding one that comes from the sample, but I do believe there are a couple other uncredited voices that pop up on the short but dope track description. Of course, with a masterpiece like this, I have a heap of honorable mentions, including The Magic Number, Change and Speak, Jennifer Taught Me or Derwin's Revenge, Ghetto Thing, Take It Off, Tread Water, Say No Go, Buddy, Daisy Age, and Me, Myself, and I. It wasn't easy, but I narrowed my three favorite songs down to I Know, Potholes in My Lawn, and Plug Tune In or Last Chance to Comprehend. Thank you for watching my 71st video. Next time, we're actually coming back to LA to cover one of my personal favorites from the 80s. So tune in to see what that one is, and if you enjoyed, be sure to like, subscribe, and let me know what your favorite moments off of this game changer are. Don't forget to have a great day, and I'll see you next time, okay? Alright.